I will put the sign in link in the chat box and share. I'll share the link in the chat box if you missed it at the end of that. But we can get started. Thank you so much for being here today.
Great. Thank you. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
I cannot see it. And Elizabeth asked if you were able to unmute her, Kim.
She, for some reason, it won't let her. Hold on, I think it's done. It won't let me make her a panelist for some weird reason. And I did have her muted. Let's try again. There you go, Elizabeth.
All right. Hi there. Hi, everybody. My name's Elizabeth Hanna, and I am a nurse practitioner at St. Mark's Hospital, and I am an obesity medicine specialist. And so I work with a lot of different kinds of people. I work with people who are preparing for bariatric surgery, or people who have had bariatric surgery who are experiencing weight regain. But I also work with people who are not bariatric patients, but are just having struggles with their weight, or maybe their health is being impacted by their weight. And so as such, I have some expertise in this area, and particularly with some weight loss myths, which is a big industry. And so we're going to talk about that today. All right, Kim, if you don't mind clicking ahead. So there's a lot of myths and ideas out there, and not all of them are based in complete non-truth. But what happens is that a lot of times we have, maybe like some research comes out, and something that is statistically significant, but not necessarily something that's actually going to make a difference in our lives or even in a clinical situation, gets picked up by the media, and it kind of takes on a life of its own. And I think some of the ideas of or things that have come out like that are intermittent fasting, or time restricted feeding, as we call it in the research world, or low or no carbs, or this idea that we have a set point weight, low fat diets, that we need to do more cardio, or maybe that we need to do more weight in order to lose weight, that our genetics play a specific role, or how the genetics that we have play a certain role in our weight, that we need to eat frequent meals, or maybe we need to eat, just a few meals a day, kind of like the timing of meals, or the role that willpower plays in weight loss. I think all of these things have come from actual research that's been done, but have maybe been misinterpreted or kind of misconstrued by the media. So let's sort through some of these sort of facts and look at how did they come to, take on like a world of their own in the pop media. So let's look at a brief history of fad diets. So can you click that again? So fad diets have been around for a long time, and pretty much there's like the same thing that comes up over and over and over again. There's essentially a starvation diet, the kind of diet that eliminates one kind of food group or another. The one thing you will never find is a protein limiting diet. Really, it's gonna be fat or carbs, because if you limit too many proteins, you'll die. So that one has never really taken off. But one thing I think that is interesting is in 1863, the Banting's low carb diet. This is, I think of it as kind of the godfather of all the original, or of all of the diet books that are still popular today, because this individual was a doctor, but he had diabetes. And he found that by really limiting his carbs, he was able to reverse his diabetes and lose weight. And as a result, he wrote this book that was very approachable. It was kind of like, I lost weight this way, I improved my health this way, and I want to help you do it. And if I did it, you can do it. And so it was really, friendly and written in this way that made people feel like they could do it too. And I think that model it rings true today, almost like 100 plus years, 150 years later, where people like this approach, where you feel like you're talking to someone who is just like you, and struggles just like you, but they've managed to overcome those struggles. And that was Dr. Banting. And I don't think he was malicious or trying to make a buck. I think he was genuinely like, hey, I lost weight this way. Let's see if you can. Other diets have come, can be pretty crazy, like the cigarette diet. Mind you, cigarettes are a great appetite suppressant, which is why when people quit smoking, they tend to gain, as much as 13 pounds. The macrobiotic diet is one that has resurfaced again and again, kind of becomes trendy. And then we start to see kind of the same diet become circulated faster and faster, kind of as, the internet has taken hold and we get social media and so many things in our culture have become faster and faster. So that has diet culture is no exception. So we just keep seeing the same diets recycled, rebranded, repackaged again and again and again. Go ahead and click forward. The sad truth is that we have this obesity epidemic, but we also have a diet industry that is worth $72 billion per year. So at this point, the diet industry really is benefiting from the obesity epidemic. They don't have a real desire for anyone to lose weight more than a couple pounds and then put it back on and then buy volume 2 of their book. Their diet books are not designed for long-term success for the most part. They really want you to fail because they want more money. They don't address the real problem. And unfortunately, the real problem is systemic and environmental, and that's going to require policy change. And it's not going to benefit the average person who has a weight problem right now in the present. So what can we do as an average person? We'll come back to that. How many people actually succeed on a diet? The sadder truth is out of 100 people who start a diet, only 15 are going to still be on that diet by the end of a year. And out of the 100 people who have started a diet, only two of those people are going to lose weight and then keep it off for over a year. And with every passing year, that number dwindles. So why is it that so few people are able to successfully lose weight? Why are we so bad at that? I think that it's important before we go any further to kind of establish something. When people say they want to lose weight, not everybody means the same thing. Why do people mean by weight loss, and why do people really even go on a diet? Do they really want to lose weight? Do they want to lose fat? Do they just want their metabolism to work better? Or is there something else that they want to achieve? Is it that they want to come off medications? Or do they want to lose inches, but they don't really care if they're the same weight? What is it that they really want? And as a result, whenever I'm working with clients, one of the first things that I want to do is kind of go over some goal setting and expectation management. I think it's a really great way to set yourself up for failure if your expectations are very unrealistic and your goals are already things that you're not going to be able to achieve, because then when you don't achieve them, you're going to just give up entirely. So I think it's a good starting point to figure out what are people willing to do and what are they unwilling to give up, rather than starting with, well, what weight do you want to be? Because that's kind of a meaningless starting point. So what's the goal, and why is that the goal? And what do they need to do in order to get to that goal? And is it really worth it? Because that answer, that will help them figure out what a sustainable lifestyle looks like. Because whatever people are going to have to do in order to get to whatever their goal weight is, it has to be something they're willing to do forever. It can't just be something they're willing to do for 30 days, because as soon as they stop doing it, they're going to put the weight back on, which is why so many diets fail. So we have very limited tools in terms of measuring metabolism and measuring nutritional units, which is problematic. Some of the common terms that we have is a calorie. Calories we take as being this sort of be all end all. And, for a long time it was accepted. Oh, if you cut out 500 calories a day, which would be 3,500 calories in a week, you'll lose a pound of fat. Well, that's just simply not true. Because if that were, then if everybody did that, at a certain point, you would just dwindle away to nothing and there'd be nothing left of you. But everybody knows that when you start cutting calories like that, at a certain point, you hit a plateau. So what gives? The other problem is, I think we all know that person or are that person who can either, eat the same thing as maybe a sibling or a friend, and that friend doesn't gain weight and we gain weight, or we don't gain weight and they gain weight. And it would be just the same as saying like, you know, well, if I take a gallon of gas and I put it in a Bronco, and I take a gallon of gas and I put it in a Prius, they're going to be able to go the same amount of distance. We know that that's not true because the engines are different, right? And we know that 85 gas is different to, say, 91 gas, and diesel is different to, you know, there's different kinds of things, and calories are no different. The other problem is, of course, that on nutrition labels, we're using calories and we're accepting that if I eat this granola bar that says it has 300 calories in it, that's, you know, that's the truth. Well, nutrition labels only actually have to be accurate within 30%. And that's a lot. So if you're over by, they estimate, you know, like 175 calories per day, that's a weight gain of probably about 5 pounds per year. So that's a problem. BMI just refers to body mass index. And this is kind of a flawed tool as well. It was never meant to be used the way we use it, which is really to look at an individual and say, well, your BMI is too high, you're going to die. It was really not to be designed, it wasn't designed to be used like this at all. It was designed by a mathematician in France in the 1800s, early 1800s. And really, it's useful for population level health, but not individual level. And when you get into the weeds a bit more, you could have someone who's very muscular and heavy, who is not obese and does not have excess fat tissue, but has a high BMI. Or on the reverse side, you could have someone who's lighter, but has a lot of excess fat tissue and actually isn't very healthy and is obese. So there's some limitations, and you have to kind of use that carefully. And yet this is what insurance companies use to determine what kind of treatments should be available for people. Then there's RMR, BMR. That refers to resting and basal metabolic rate. Slight difference. One is, you know, takes into account sort of getting up and going to the bathroom, and one of them just is lying there and not moving at all. Kind of your metabolic rate, how many calories you burn just for cellular turnover. And that's a fluid number. You know, it changes from time to time. And you might have ideas about what your own values are for these things, but there's so many flaws with how our daily calorie recommendations were set for what people should have that it's almost useless, but it's almost not too. I mean, you know, roughly we know that the average adult needs 2,000 calories, but what about someone who's 5'1" and female? They definitely do not. So it's hard. And I think that sometimes people stick to these very rigidly, and that's not very useful for health professionals or for people. So we can go on to the next slide. So we have these different types of diets, going back to those fad diets, and this is essentially what we have that we're working with. We've got a hypocaloric or a balanced diet. So that's kind of like eating what you eat, hopefully kind of taking from all the macros, protein, fat, and carbohydrate, but just trying to eat less of it. And that's your basics. That's your Jenny Craig, that's your original Weight Watchers, your Mayo Clinic diet, maybe volumetrics. And I'll be honest with you, time and time again, in study after study, this seems to be the winner. It seems to be the one that keeps people feeling the most full. It seems to have the best results. When you do it over a long period of time, people stick with it the longest, and people just tend to do the best. Then we've got our high protein, low carb. Atkins was kind of the original. Well, I guess Banting was, if you argue that, but Atkins was kind of like the most famous one. People don't tend to stick to these very well, so they don't do as well on them. And ultimately, when you look at any of these, what you find is people are just creating a calorie deficit anyway, so it's different ways to skin a cat. But people are left hungrier, and these kinds of diets can often lead to binges as well. There's the low-fat diet. The low-fat diet came from very flawed research, but it's actually pretty effective. And again, it just creates a calorie deficit. DASH diet, a lot of these cardiac diets. Jenny Craig has a version, Weight Watchers has a version. And then there's time-restricted feeding. And again, time after time, it's shown that it just doesn't work for most people. I think probably because it's fairly antisocial, and it tends to just create a calorie deficit because you're limiting the window in which you're eating. Some people do well on it, but it is a very small percentage of people. And I think that has to do with the fact that we like to eat. Eating is a social activity, and we are social animals. And so when you limit yourself to not being able to ever, I don't know, go out to dinner with people or go to a celebration and not participate, that tends to become onerous. And so people just tend to drop out of those kinds of programs. But that doesn't mean that everybody's going to drop out. And I think with any one given diet plan, there's always going to be that person who really thrives on it. And I think that's where these kind of fad diets come from, is there's always that one person who's like, you know, I did really awesome with this. And we see them and we think, well, they did it, maybe it'll work for me. And hope springs eternal. And then there's the genotype style diets. And I just don't think that our technology is there quite yet to be clinically useful. But it's interesting stuff, you know, for sure, that there might be this idea that, you know, maybe a low fat diet works better for somebody than somebody else due to genetics. But I don't think we're quite there yet. And essentially what we do know is that none of us are designed to thrive in the current food environment, which is just full of, you know, ultra processed, hyper palatable, non-food items. So I like this little poem that I found on Twitter. It was a dietitian that had that up, which is roses are red, violets are blue. Any diet that eliminates an entire food group probably isn't good for you. So I feel like we're inundated with so much stuff about what a healthy diet means that a lot of times people think they're eating a healthy diet, but in reality, it maybe isn't, because there's just so much stuff out there. I often have patients come in and they're so proud to tell me that they don't eat fruit. And that's come from kind of this keto mentality, and they're just working so hard to avoid sugar. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, eat fruit. Fruit's great for you. You know, fruit's high in fiber. It's got tons of micronutrients. You know, it's amazing for you. And there's other things too, where people are just avoiding these really great foods because they've picked up on something, you know, or they say, I'm intermittent fasting. And I go, well, what does that mean? And they're like, I'm skipping breakfast. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's when you're most metabolically active, you know? And it comes from all these kind of things that we've picked up and then, you know, created like an even worse way of eating because of all the stuff that's out there. So we live in a diet culture, you know, even though we have this huge obesity crisis, we also live in a diet culture. And yo-yo dieting is huge in America. And I think it's worthwhile stepping back and kind of taking pause and going, well, what does that mean? What is a diet? What's the purpose of a diet? You know, is it just that we want to live kind of a hedonistic lifestyle most of the time and kind of eat what we consider naughty foods and crummy, and then every once in a while just punish ourselves and eat nothing but lettuce and whatever we think is healthy, and then lose that weight and then just go back to gaining it? I mean, if that's what we want to do, that's, you know, that's something. Is it problematic to have this sort of mentality, sort of a feast and famine or a Lent mentality? And what is the impact of yo-yo dieting on our body? Do we know? Is it okay to be like that? I mean, is it a problem if you constantly kind of lose and regain the same 10 pounds? And also, like, what kind of impact is it having on our psyche, you know, our mental health, to constantly be thinking, oh, I need to go on a diet. I need to start a diet tomorrow. I'm not the right weight that I should be, or, you know, that I'm not eating the way I should at all times. Or when you go and enjoy a meal, there's that kind of nagging doubt in your head that you're not being a good person. Because I think there's a lot of that good, bad food mentality, and it's, you know, sort of like putting values onto food. So we do know that it has an impact on our bodies, and it's not just people with weight issues. Yo-yo dieting has an impact on your cardiovascular health. We see it in people that are professional dieters. And when I say professional dieters, I'm talking about your weightlifters, your fighters. They have to get down to weight. And so we can study them and see that they also have these kind of problems that we see at the higher end of the spectrum, and people that have serious weight problems who have tried every single diet in the book and have sometimes lost and regained hundreds and hundreds of pounds over their life. And it hurts pretty much every single major organ system in your body. So weight cycling is not good for you. It can increase hypertension. It can increase metabolic syndrome risk. It can increase all sorts of problems, diabetes. So it would probably be better to not diet in the first place. And it definitely leads to an overshoot for people at the higher end of that too. So they end up heavier in the long run and with less muscle mass than if they had never dieted in the first place. So what about weight and health? If you are heavy, doesn't mean that you are unhealthy. This has been a big kind of area of contention for the last couple of years. And there's a big health at every size movement. And it kind of rages on at the dietary, like among the dietitians. And I'm not going to really weigh in on that right now. Pardon the pun. But, you know, it's tricky. I think that weight is sometimes a good proxy, which means that, you know, it's not for everybody. Some people can be pretty heavy and they are not going to have those sort of diseases that we attribute to weight. For example, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes. Some people can be heavy and they just don't have those issues. I think that once you get up to a certain BMI, the likelihood of that decreases incredibly. You know, when you have a BMI of 60, the likelihood that you are quote unquote healthy and don't have any of these other cardiometabolic health issues becomes increasingly unlikely. And what I often see, especially in the BMIs of 60, is that someone can cruise along and not have any health issues, but then all of a sudden they do. And I saw that a lot with COVID. It was like all of a sudden they develop like flash pulmonary hypertension and they were on the ICU. And, you know, and even without COVID, you see this sometimes. So I think sometimes it's like they seem pretty healthy, but it's like that straw that breaks the camel's back is it doesn't take much. But at the lower BMIs, like, and I'm saying lower, but like, you know, in the 40s, you know, you can have people that actually don't have a lot of health problems, but it's kind of unusual. But there's definitely gray area. But one thing for sure is carrying excess weight, it does take its toll on our joints and our body, which is why, you know, at the VA, even people that are not heavy, if they have been in the theater of war and they've had to carry big, heavy packs around, tend to have injuries, particularly in their lumbar and their lower back. You know, that just happens. It's not nice to carry around big, heavy things. And if we're the big, heavy thing we're carrying around, it's hard to not do that. Adipose tissue is pro-inflammatory and it increases coagulopathies, which means increases your chances of getting clots. So that's something else to kind of keep in mind. And it's also a risk factor for several types of cancer. The relationship between obesity and cancer is not necessarily fully straightforward, but we do seem to know that it does contribute to it in its own right. So it might be the case that losing weight is advisable and that health at every size is not quite possible. So one thing I think is important is to choose the right tool for the job. I think this goes back to why do so few people succeed at losing weight when they go on a diet? I think part of it's because people tend to go on diets when they don't need to, or they use the wrong tool for the job. So if somebody really needs to lose 75 plus pounds, kind of a rule of thumb, they probably should be thinking about bariatric surgery. Mind you, not everybody's suitable for bariatric surgery, but generally, if somebody's looking to lose closer to 10% body weight, lifestyle changes are definitely more appropriate, you know. But what about medications? And we'll discuss that later. You know, that's kind of like that in between. You know, if somebody wants to lose a lot of weight with lifestyle changes alone, the chances of their success and keeping it off is very low. And that's because of metabolic adaptations that take place that we have much better understanding of now than we used to. And I always ask people, well, do you know anyone who's lost 75 plus pounds and kept it off for more than a year? And most people don't. They don't know anyone, you know, or if they do, it might be someone that had bariatric surgery, or it's, you know, this rare exception, or somebody who went vegan and that's not something they're willing to do. And if they do know somebody, which again, I haven't had somebody say yes to that in a really long time, we talk about, well, what do they do to keep it off? And is that something that you would be able to do? And then we think about, you know, celebrities even that have lost a lot of weight. And do we really think that they use diet and lifestyle to do that? Or do we think some of them had bariatric surgery and just haven't been honest about it? Most of the time, they probably have had bariatric surgery and haven't been honest about it. One exception to that rule is Penn Jillette. He lost 103 pounds. And what he does to keep that off is he has one meal a day, and that meal is vegan. Not junk food vegan, like vegan. And I think that he's useful to look at because he has been so honest about it. And I think that if somebody wants to lose something like 103 pounds. And keep in mind, this is a man who's over 6'4" and male. And that's what he has to do to maintain that 103-pound loss. He eats one meal a day and it's vegan. And so if people aren't really willing to make that kind of sacrifice to their life, they might need to adjust their goals. So the metabolic adaptations that I'm talking about, one of the biggest things that we were able to figure out about our metabolism came from The Biggest Loser, unfortunately, which was this really awful show. And if you had ever tried to, say, put together a study that looked at the things that we got from The Biggest Loser, it never would have gotten past an ethical review. But it was for TV, so it happened. So this guy, Kevin Hall at the NIH, was able to study these people, and we discovered all these things. And we always knew that as you lost weight, obviously there's less of you, so you require fewer calories. But we knew as well that the metabolism did slow down, more than just explained by there's less of you. But what we didn't know is how much it slowed down, and it slowed down a lot more than we expected. So you take someone like this chap here, who was 430 pounds. At the finale, he was 191 pounds. And keep in mind, this was in 2016, and he's actually regained even more since then. And then at this time in 2016, he was 295 pounds. So he'd regained even 104 pounds. And he burned 800 fewer calories than somebody who was his exact same body composition who had never been 430 pounds. The other thing that's going on that's not explained by that, so he's burning 800 calories less, which is significant, but he's also really, really hungry, because that's the other thing your body does, is it adjusts your satiety and hunger hormones backwards to try to get you to regain that weight, which is why we see a lot of people regain weight, because their body wants to bump them back up to that 430 and then add a few pounds on top in order to protect you from the next time you decide to starve yourself, because your body perceives that as a famine. And what we also discovered was that this kind of adaptation that takes place, I call it metabolic scarring, it's permanent. You never recover, like you never adjust, you never, then make the adjustments eventually so that then he would have the metabolism of somebody of that size who'd never been 430. That never happens. And also when he then bumped, if, I don't know if he got back up to 430, but if he did, his leptin, which is a hormone that tells you that you're full, will never be as balanced as it was when he was 430. It never goes back to normal. You can go ahead and click forward. So that's pretty hopeless, but let's look at people who have lost less weight and are doing well and keeping it off. There's the National Weight Control Registry. And these are people who have lost at least 30 pounds for a year. And most of them have actually lost a little bit more. They haven't lost more than 75 pounds. Most of them are like 66 pounds, and they've kept it off for 5 years. And so we kind of look at, what are they doing? What's their secret to success? Well, they eat breakfast, they weigh themselves regularly, they don't watch a lot of TV, and they exercise for about an hour a day. So again, that goes back to that sort of using the appropriate tools. These are not people that have tried to overshoot and lose 200 pounds with lifestyle alone. They're going for a more modest weight loss goal. And then these are the things that they've done, just some things that are sustainable that they can do for the rest of their lives. So willpower, I think, is always worth looking at, because I think a lot of people think that what it's down to is willpower. If I just had more willpower, I could do this. But willpower is really a bucket you deplete. It's not a muscle that you build. So if people come in and they want to try to lose weight or make, lifestyle changes, I think it's worth looking at what they're doing right now. And if they're in school and they're taking care of their parents and they've got little kids at home and they're also working, it's like, well, where are you going to get the energy and the extra reserve to also lose weight and focus on yourself? If you're spending all your time taking care of other people, you're not going to have that time to also work on your food choices and creating an active lifestyle. You need to consider that too, because you've got to have something for yourself. It is a bucket that you deplete, not a muscle you build. So if you ever want to make changes, you have to consider that. Where are you going to be taking it away from? So medical management, that's something else that I think people always want to know about. Well, can't I take a pill? Maybe. It depends on your health and where you're at. There's not a magic bullet out there really weight loss is based on the foundation of diet, exercise, sleep, and stress. That's the biggie. You have to make those changes. And that's even for people that get bariatric surgery. Bariatric surgery is not a magic bullet either. Medications can help in conjunction with those things, but they're not for everybody. And sometimes it's just worthwhile going through someone's medications and looking at what ones they're taking that can really contribute to weight gain. The development of weight loss drugs has been super slow, and there's not very many on the market. There's only 5 really for long-term use, and people, I think, wish there was more and think that I'm going to pull something out of my hat, and I really don't have anything. Pharmaceutical companies are unlikely to recoup their money from developing these drugs, and so there's not a huge incentive. The main one that's been a big leap forward in development has been a diabetes medication called Ozempic. But even then, insurance companies are very flaky about covering it, and it costs about $1,500 a month. And obesity is a chronic disease, and we need to start treating it like one, not just like, let's get a quick fix and fix it. It needs to be long-term. And so really at my clinic, my philosophy is that the culture of blame has not solved the obesity crisis. It's time to try compassion. So this is a complex problem that we have as a society. There's no one simple solution. We try to use medical insight to understand what might be contributing to somebody's situation. And so we use an interdisciplinary approach for people, dietitians as well as social workers, and try to do like comprehensive services. And we always feel like the right diet is the one that's going to work for somebody, and that there's not a quick fix out there. The one thing I would tell anybody who wants to improve their lifestyle, whether they need to lose weight or not, and also kind of contribute to the wider good of society, is to plant a garden. And this is the perfect time to do it. It's been raining. By planting a garden and planting some fruits and vegetables and growing them on your own, that is like the first step that we can take in terms of trying to create a less obesogenic environment as a society. And I just offered up some life hacks, small changes that you can make as an individual. You're more likely to adopt a change if you can focus on it and keep it up for 21 days. So maybe just find one thing you want to change. Maybe it's to drink more water every day. Maybe it's to eat more fiber. Maybe it's just to hit 10,000 steps every day, and try to do that for 21 days, and reframe your changes to something positive rather than something negative. So rather than being like, I'm not going to drink soda anymore, maybe you're going to try to drink 80 ounces of water every day, and then that'll just crowd out that soda. Or, maybe instead of being like, I'm not going to eat pastries anymore, you're going to try to eat 10 pieces of fruit or vegetables every day, And sometimes we can crowd out our negative things without having to focus on not having something, but trying to have something positive. And write down your why you're doing something and put it somewhere you can see it every day. So are there any questions for me or any comments?
Hold on, I'm just looking at some questions. Take me just 1 second. Okay, lots of people are just talking to themselves about not being able to see the screen. Hey, diets don't work long term because people make too many drastic changes all at once. They also have short-term mindset with these changes. I think that's pretty much what you were saying, Liz.
Yeah, totally.
What are your thoughts on counting macros?
Tends to be pretty complicated. There's a lot of studies that show just counting, just aiming for 30 grams of fiber a day, and people have just as much weight loss as any of the other strategies, but counting 30 grams of fiber is easier.
How do you know when you've lost enough weight?
Your body will plateau. I mean, there's enough. What's enough? You know what I mean? I mean, at a certain point, once you've gotten heavy enough, you might not be able to on your own lose enough weight to make a significant difference to your overall health, especially if you have diabetes. And you might just need to either accept that and go, okay, well, I can do what I can do, or you might really need to consider bariatric surgery depending on how heavy you are. And I mean, that's a sad fact, but But there it is. You know, once we get to a certain tipping point, you know, it's like heart disease, you know, we can wish it away and we can do things, but at a certain point, like we might need interventions that are out of our control if we've let something get too far.
Right.
And obesity is no different. You know what I mean? It's like if you break your back, you know, you can do physical therapy and stuff, but sometimes you got to wear a brace and sometimes you got to get surgery. And obesity is no different. We've just stigmatized it so much that we don't like that we think that it's in our control more than it really is. Even though study after study after study shows that it's not. You know, I mean, actually, you probably have better chance healing your own back from a fracture than you would losing weight. You know, studies have shown that, and yet I have so many people come in and they feel so ashamed of themselves in terms of their weight that when we talk about bariatric surgery, you know, they're like, well, I need to do this myself. It's my fault that I got like this. And it's really sad. You know, no one would ever say that about cancer. It'd be like, no, I can't do chemo. I've got to do this myself. I did this to myself. And, you know, chances are some cancers, they probably did do it to themselves, especially if they smoked or went out in the sun or ate crummy foods, you know, and yet nobody ever says that about chemo. But we've done this with obesity. We've stigmatized it and still discriminate against it. And I find that really sad.
Okay, thank you. Kind of in the same realm here. It's the same person. They say, I lost 30 pounds in the past year and not at an ideal weight. Am I done?
Are you what?
Am I done?
Done
So
losing weight? I don't know.
they feel like they've lost 30 pounds. They don't feel like they're at their ideal weight.
I mean, I think losing 30 pounds is awesome. That's amazing. You know, and I mean, if your body's resisting you at this point, I mean, just being able to lose 30 pounds and then keeping it off for over a year will put you into that 2% of people. Only 2% of people are able to keep that weight off and then keep it off for a year. So, I mean, that's a success. That's huge.
Right.
If you keep it off for a year, you'll be able to go into the National Weight Registry. I mean, that's amazing.
Thank you. What is happening when you weigh yourself one day and then the next day your weight is 3 pounds higher?
Probably sodium and water. I know, it's amazing. It's like, what happened? That's probably fluid.
This person says, I tried metformin and amphetamines, 10 years ago. How does that mess with your body losing weight?
I don't know. I'd have to look at your personal case. Metformin was commonly used for weight loss. I don't think it's particularly effective. It's great. It's a great drug for diabetes and stuff. It's one of the entry ones, but it was used, you know, thrown at people all the time inappropriately for weight loss back in the day. It's a very old school method. It's still used. Some psychiatrists still do it, but it's been discredited. I mean, you can go to lots of weight loss treatment places and see all sorts of discredited things still happening. But it sequesters sugar out of your body, you know, but metformin, actually, I'll tell you one thing it is good for. If you're a man and you're aging, it seems to have anti-aging qualities, which is kind of cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
What is up with all the new ads about weight loss drugs, such as Contrave and Calibrate and GLP-1?
Yeah, GLP, that's your Ozempic. That's a diabetic medication. It's been that's the one that's $1,500 a month. It's neat. It's a great drug. You have to be on it for the rest of your life, though. Contrave has been around for a long time. It's Wellbutrin and naltrexone combined. It's okay. It works pretty well for some people, but a lot of people are already on Wellbutrin for depression. So for a lot of people, that ain't gonna do nothing. So you know what I mean? But Wegovy, that's what you're seeing in all of these things. It's a neat drug, and it's probably the biggest breakthrough we've had in a really, really, really long time. But for $1,500 a month, you could probably hire somebody to come and tell you what to eat every morning.
So with the Wellbutrin,
and I don't think the patent runs out for another 10 years or something. It's crazy.
Do you have to be on a certain milligram with the Wellbutrin to make it be weight loss?
No. But I mean, if you're already on Wellbutrin and you've been on it for a while, you've already had that benefit. It's not gonna do anything for you.
Right.
Wellbutrin's a great med. I mean, that would have been the one to buy stock in when they first invented it, I think, because You know, they can do a lot of things, anti-smoking, and you know, they're making a lot of money off of that, whoever invented that.
Yeah. Do you recommend weight training or cardio in order to tone up and get muscle definition?
So here's the thing. I recommend you do whatever you're going to do and stick with. So if you hate weightlifting and you're not going to do it, then you're not going to do it, you know? But if you're ambivalent, you're like, you know, towards, or not ambivalent, but if you're like, if you don't care, if you're like, I could do cardio, I could do weights, I don't care towards one way or the other. If you only have 30 minutes, I would always say do weights, always, because it's going to make you more metabolically flexible. And it's going to do things like reduce your risk of diabetes and metabolic syndrome. Whereas cardio isn't. But if you prefer cardio and you'll stick to cardio, then choose what you're going to do, you know? If you love swimming and that's your favorite thing to do, then do what you're going to love. You know, I love weightlifting, and that I would happily do that all day, every day. But in terms of bang for your buck, if you have a limited amount of time and you don't mind doing weightlifting, weightlifting is going to give you more bang for your buck.
Great, thank you. This person says, I have heard about people putting on weight to get bariatric surgery. Who determines if you are 75 pounds overweight?
75 pounds is just kind of a quick and fast rule. Insurance companies want you to be a BMI of 35 with a comorbidity, and it depends on the insurance company, but it's usually high blood pressure, dyslipidemia of some sort, so high cholesterol or hyperlipidemia, diabetes type 2, not pre-diabetes, but diabetes type 2, sleep apnea, or severe GERD requiring like omeprazole daily. So usually that's what the insurance companies want, is something like that. And if you have a BMI of 35 and one of those things, then they will consider you. If you don't have one of those things, but you have a BMI of 40, then usually insurance companies will consider you. Some insurance companies do not include bariatric at all, period. Utah is one of 13 states that does not require their Obamacare coverage to include bariatric, and that is unfortunate.
Great. I have a person here that says that they did the bypass and they've done everything else before, nothing worked, but this has really been great for her and it's helped stabilize their weight. So
Yeah.
That's good to hear. I kind of feel like the message here is that we should just be happy and with how we are, because nothing is going to work.
Not necessarily. Like I said, I think it's about, well, everyone should be happy. There's, you know, you only live once, but I think it's about choosing the right tool. And one of the things that I think is the worst thing you can do is say, I want to be the same weight that I was in high school, or, you know, choose a really unrealistic thing, or go to the bookstore and go, well, let's choose this crazy diet and go on that. You know, if you think my health is not where it is, or, you know, I could stand to spend some time working on my own health, and maybe that is weight related, then the thing that I would always advise is go to a professional, you know, or, and when I say professional, it doesn't necessarily mean me. Weight Watchers is a great program that's been around forever, you know, and the Mayo Clinic that's a great diet. That's also been around forever, but those are not fad diets, you know, those are more aimed at like long-term, sustainable changes. And so rather than kind of jumping on something that's gonna, you know, end up giving you those kind of quick results, maybe, or just discouraging you, and then being something that you only follow for a couple of weeks and then regaining, try to find something that's going to work for you, that you're going to be able to make long-term changes, and make sure that the people that you talk to actually know what they're talking about. And sometimes, I hate to say this, sometimes it's not your doctor. Doctors don't get training in weight loss, and they don't get training in nutrition. And I have so many people come in and they were told by their doctor to do keto because that's how they lost weight or something. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, so if you do seek health professionals, like go to someone who actually is an obesity expert. And sometimes it is your doc, but sometimes it's not. And make sure that you do something that's not a fad. And there are, like I said, Weight Watchers is awesome. I love the Mayo Clinic diet. I think that's good. The Mind diet, anything that's like a Mediterranean based diet, those are always pretty good. Make sure it's something that fits in with your lifestyle and is realistic for you.
Great.
Elizabeth, I would like to add to that too. I think if our focus is solely on the weight, then we won't necessarily be happy, right?
Yeah,
If we're
totally.
just focusing on that number, we should change our perspective to be about health, about longevity and feeling good. And that can create happiness and gratitude for the life and the body that we have rather than focusing on a number that was arbitrarily just created by the diet industry.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree fully. And that's why I try to get people to set more flexible goals, where we're like, okay, well, let's aim for this, but let's see what happens. And most of the time, by the time I meet with people for a couple times, like, sure, we're trying to lose weight, maybe, but it's like it becomes less about that, as we go on. And then becomes more about something else. And then the big thing for me too is like once we get to a certain place, it's about the maintaining and making sure that we're not doing stuff that is not sustainable. Because what I don't ever want to do is do what the Biggest Losers did and have somebody lose a bunch of weight just to regain it, because that causes permanent damage.
And thank you. This person says that they have a friend who is considering going to Tijuana, Mexico to get bariatric surgery. Any thoughts on that?
I wouldn't go to Tijuana for a burrito, let alone a surgery.
I have heard that if you have any surgeries in Mexico and you have problems later on, that your insurance won't pay for that because you've gone out of network per se.
Yeah, they won't. They won't. I mean, the thing is, like, I don't understand why anyone would go to Tijuana for that stuff. Like, honestly, like, Mexico City has universities. Like, they have like surgical centers there. I mean, that's the thing that always baffles me. I'm like, okay, you want to go to Mexico? Like, why would you choose like a border town that is like notorious for crime and poor sanitation? But people are going to do what they're going to do to save a couple $1,000. What's funny to me is I have several clients who are Hispanic and from Mexico, and I always ask them, like, how come we don't go back to Mexico to get it done? Because it is cheaper there, but I'm not talking Tijuana. And every single one of them, and these are not rich people, these are people that are maybe working a couple jobs. Some of them are paying cash to come here. And every single one of them has said to me, are you crazy? Why would you go get surgery in Mexico? And I think that's really telling. These are people who speak the language, who have family there. They could easily do the research and find a decent surgeon, and they would rather come to our center and pay, triple American dollars than go down there. And I think that says a lot. And it's usually ladies like from Park City. They'll go on these bus tours and stuff and go down there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
But I have several, like right now on my books, I have several.
So someone wants to know how successful bariatric surgery is.
A bariatric surgery, and I say, unfortunately, really, I wish there was something better. Like, I really do, but it remains our most durable method of long-term weight loss. It's incredibly successful. We're getting better and better. I think nowadays we finally have realized that we really need to focus on the psychological aspect of it. And so we're much better at preparing people for it and saying, what's our long-term goal with this? Because if you just go back there, like I said, if you just go back to eating the way you used to, if it's not a sustainable thing, well, you will regain eventually. It takes much longer with bariatric surgery. I mean, much, much longer, years, but people can do it if they put their mind to it. We have an incredible capacity for self-destruction, and so that's something that I try to work with my patients a lot, is to make sure that they are very aware of their sort of weak spots and blind spots. And we try to work on that and develop plans for, well, how are you going to deal with your stress better in the future?
Great, thank you. Maybe Sadie, you can address this one. It says the county included bariatric in our benefits this last year. Is that true? Would you like to address that?
That would be a question for our benefits team. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that one.
And then this person also said that St. Mark's has a program that is as cost effective as going to Mexico. So that's a good answer. We like that one.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, we've been around a long time. This has been a Center for Excellence for a long time. It really is a good program, which makes me happy to work here because I can feel really good about the stuff that we do.
Great. I don't see any other questions, so I
Great.
think we're going to call it a day. Elizabeth, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
today. I really learned a lot with this. That was really fascinating today.
Great. Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it. I like all the questions.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.